Hey, good morning. It's Sandy Casella here with Casella Homes Real Estate, and I'm with Cuong Chong. And Cuong's also a realtor in the GTA. So today we're going to talk a little bit about just what's going on in the market, interest rates, a bunch of different things, and we'll just have a discussion. Hopefully, this is helpful for some people. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel to get more of these videos. If you have any questions for either of us, we will give our phone numbers at the end, and you can always feel free to reach out. So, Cuong, tell me, just introduce yourself to everybody.
Hi, Sandy. So I'm Kwang Chong, well, or Nick Kwong Chong as
Yes.
my stage name there. So I've been doing real estate about 16 years. I joined real estate like because everyone told me that it's a great business to join, and I came in 2008, as we all know, when the market was the absolute worst, but things have improved, and then we've had a few bumps in the road, but real estate's been fun since, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And what market are you in? Tell everyone what market you're in.
I work mainly in Toronto and York region, Markham, Richmond Hill, and we've seen a lot of swings. Obviously, I find my way to Durham sometimes, but as you know, like you and I were discussing earlier, right? Real estate is very, very localized, right? So just because it's great in one area doesn't necessarily mean it's great in other areas.
Yeah. And I find I think this year, I think actually the last few years have all been kind of like we don't really know what's going to happen. Like they've been kind
Right.
of weird markets a little bit. And sometimes, I think reports and stuff that people hear is like takes a very wide range in, right? Like maybe some of the reports we hear are all across Canada, like what's going on all across Canada. And we know that, that's not relevant in a lot of areas. The GTA is a very, very specific market.
Yeah.
And so I like in terms of coverage, like you pretty much cover like the East End,
Yeah.
like East Toronto and then North York and Markham and stuff. And then we're typically in the West End and stuff. So
Correct.
it can be a little bit different even within our markets, right? Like from where you are and where I am.
100%. Like I mean, even like you were saying, like the East End, right? That part there. It's not soon as we cross into Durham region, right? It completely changes, right? It's real estate, like I said earlier, very, very localized.
Yeah. What are you seeing in terms of, I want to talk a little bit about interest rates. I think the next rate announcement is coming up, I think next week, or a couple of weeks, if I'm not
It
mistaken. So
you know
it's
what?
April.
This is one of the most I guess it's the sexy topic right now, right? For all of us because it's pretty it has changed the market completely, right? Like, I mean, for most of us, most realtors, they basically, their business relies a lot on referral business, right? And that pretty much dried up because equity was just pouring into us. Do you remember the good old days? It wasn't even that long ago, right? Every month, you're gaining about anywhere between 5, sometimes 10% of equity
Mhm.
in a short period of time, right? That is gone. So what do we do, right? A lot of people they just have to stay where they are because you can't move up or down, right? Well, definitely you can't move up because getting a mortgage now is not quite as easy.
Yeah. So I think it'll be interesting to see. But the interesting thing I find though is that like people have to get off of this mindset, I think, in my opinion, like especially buyers or people like selling a house and buying another one, of going by what everybody else is doing. Because that's a
Right,
big problem, I think. Like we had, I mean, November, December, buyers who were just sitting on the fence and waiting. They all wanted to see what was going to happen.
right.
And then come the spring, like we're back in a market in our area where there's multiple offers and you're going in with firm offers again. And I think that like these are buyers who could have bought back in November, December, but didn't want to because they didn't know what was going to happen. And I think the biggest issue is what they're thinking is, if everybody else is buying, they must know something that I don't know. And so now they try to buy that. Now they're buying because there's that social proof. But you have like trust your instincts and trust if you have a good realtor that's giving you all your options and explaining things to you, trust that, because all of those other buyers don't know any more than you know. So you could,
That's
like in November, December, you could shop around, You could have a financing clause. You could have a home inspection clause. Those are the things you should be looking at. And now people are like, oh, well, everybody else is buying, so I'm going to buy. And they're perfectly willing to go in with no financing, no home inspection. It's really just the buyer confidence that's changed. But if you had bought back then, it'd be the same rate as right now, but now you have no leverage there. So I think that's a really important point that people have to understand.
Well, demand has actually historically demand goes up during, let's say, March, April, May. Sometimes it runs to June, right? People will be wondering
Yeah.
because your regular person doesn't understand why this happens. So let's tell them why it happens, Sandy. One of the things that happens is in March, let's say for instance, if you need a closing for 90 to 120 days, right? Everyone is moving in July, August, all that stuff. Well, guess what happens? You have to purchase the home long before that for you to actually move in July and August, right?
Yeah.
And that's why the market always goes up during these times because supply, let's assume supply stays the same, right? Slightly goes up a bit, but the demand goes up drastically. And that's why the prices they go up, right?
Yeah.
And that's what you're finding. I like that you brought up the point. Well, you know what? November, December. Listen, you're preaching to the choir. I couldn't stop texting my database to let them know right now you have no competition. You have no competition, and you actually can get what you want, exactly what you want. But what do? They wait for everyone to jump in the market, and they goes, "Oh, it's picking up," and now they're overpaying for a property that they could have easily,
Yeah. I know.
easily saved
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'll give you an example too. I have a client that's looking in a certain area, right? In North Riverdale, all right, downtown North Riverdale. So they could have easily purchased a property for 1.1 million. Okay. And that's in exactly what you said, November. Remember in October, everyone thought, oh, yeah, the market's going to recover. No, it's just because people still can't afford mortgages at that point, right? And if they're going to make a move, like I said, just artificially it goes up, in the springtime. But in that time, November, like you said, December, 1.1. Well, guess what happened last month, Sandy?
Oh my goodness. What did it
Same
sell for?
property, same property in North
Yeah.
Riverdale. Just so you know, the people that live there, their income is a lot higher than most people, right?
Yeah.
Now they're like, wow, we got to move here because the kids have to get into school, all this stuff. Guess what happens? Now you're paying over 1.5 million for the same
Oh
property.
my goodness. That's
It
crazy,
was
eh?
it's the
Yeah.
same property, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's the demand. The supply was still the same, but the demand
Yeah.
changed. Once it changed, it shot through the roof. Sometimes people get crazy. They just want to live in that area, but they don't want to do it during November,
Yeah.
November,
Yeah. I
December,
know.
January, February. No one wants to move during that
Yeah.
time. Well, guess what? If you were inconvenienced just a tad, you save that much money.
Yeah. And that's a lot of money. Like that's
It's
not
not
a
a little
little bit
money.
of money, right? That's like,
Yeah,
that's a crazy amount of money. So yeah,
you
I totally get
literally
it. Yeah.
you literally could fill up the pool when we had loonies. Like if we still had the dollar bills, you could fill up a pool of
Yeah.
that, right? It's a lot of
Yeah.
money. Not a tiny bit. So
Yeah.
how are you finding it in the West End? In
It's really picked up again here. Like
Oh,
I
has it?
think a lot of places have multiple offers again. Now,
Okay.
what we're not seeing is crazy price increases. Like we're seeing
Okay.
five, six, seven offers, which is still a significant amount of offers
Right.
and houses selling over asking. But we are also seeing houses that are holding offers and then not getting what they want and coming back on the market. So
Okay.
it's a really interesting market. It's a really tricky market.
Right.
But as long as you know what you want, the biggest thing is to know what you want, what your
Right.
budget is, and then stick to it. Like we're like not to toot our own homes, but we're like really highly trained realtors. Like we spend a lot of money, you and I and other realtors in our coaching program. We spend a lot of money on
Yeah.
training and being like cutting edge. So, I think with our marketing and with how we educate our clients, I think that's really important. Like we're giving you, like people think, oh, realtors just want to make more money. No, like it hurts me. Like it literally hurts me that someone could have bought a property in November for 1.1 and now a few short months later they're paying 1.4, 1.5. And some
Yeah.
people will go, oh, well, realtors don't care. They just want to make more money. That's just absolutely so far from the truth. And because like because we're so highly trained, like, and we have such good systems in place, like our paying our mortgage doesn't rely on us making that deal. So
Yeah.
what do we care about is our client getting the best that they can get? Are they making the decision that's right for them right now? Because we want that client for life. We want them to come back to us, right? So that's important.
Well, for us, it's and I know you and your team are very similar, right? We always believe in saving the client over saving the deal, right? See,
Absolutely.
Like
Yeah.
like like I'll tell you right now, like in 2022, some of the most disgusting things, I mean disgusting that I saw what happened to home buyers. It honestly, there are a lot of realtors that should not be licensed. Like
Yeah.
do you remember the news when they talked about in 2022? There's going to be the government even told us we are going to be raising the rates at least. Originally, it was supposed to be 6 times, right? They said something like
Yeah.
6 times, end up moving like 8 times or something like that, right? Eight
Yeah.
or 10 times. But realtors, as soon as the first rate change came in, which was only at 0.25 in March 2022, the market changed like that. All of a sudden, like for the variable rates, it shot up. It shot up. People weren't like, if you're going variable, you weren't getting minus 0.8 or whatever, something crazy like that, right? Now it was plus. So it was
Hmm.
plus and then plus whatever the 0.25. So rates overnight shot through the roof. And did you know what I noticed? Going into even June, we had realtors going into multiple offer situations. Even though we were just rates kept on going up, they weren't aware of it. And I'll tell you why these realtors weren't aware of it, because they have full-time jobs, right? I'm not saying a realtor can't be good at their job if they're part-timers, but the chances are very low. Because if your focus full time is on your other job and you treat your realtor job as a hobby. Like, think about it. These people are throwing all the money that they have in the world, and you're treating this job as a hobby. What do you think the results are going to be?
Yeah. That's important. That's why it's so important to kind of like pick somebody based on the education part of it, like do your research, do your due diligence. But this big brings up a good point about like all the changes that we've had in our industry, because there's been a
Oh,
lot with our new Tressa rules, as well as all these
100%.
lawsuits that are happening in the US that,
Yeah.
I mean, that stuff is going to trickle here. Let's talk a little bit about that, about what's going on in the US and the fact that they're saying, you can't, all these, major lawsuits about you can't have, people are saying, oh, there's not going to be any more buyer agents. I think, in my opinion, buyer agents are super important. Like, you need a buyer
Of
agent
course
on
they
your
are.
side, because people don't understand that if you don't, yeah, people just think, oh, I'm going to get a better deal through the listing agent. But first of all, you don't know that, because you don't know what the listing agent's deal is with their client. They're not necessarily lowering their commission. And then
No.
you have nobody working for you. So get a good realtor, have a buyer agency signed, but make sure, like, have a cancellation guarantee. Like, if you're not doing your job, the issue comes in where people sign these buyer agency agreements for a year and a half, and don't have anything in place where, okay, what are we going to do if things aren't going well? Like, can I get out of this contract? That's the
Correct.
most important thing, right? We give cancellation guarantees, because I tell my team all the time, look, if you take a buyer on, you sign a buyer agency for a year, and then all you do is set them up on an MLS search and hope that they're going to call you, and that person calls to cancel, we're canceling, because you're not doing your job. That's not what we're like. You don't need me. You don't need a realtor if all I'm going to do is give you what's on the MLS. You can find that yourself, and I shouldn't get paid for that. But you gotta
100%.
do your job as a buyer. Do your due diligence. Have a buyer agent working for you, but make sure you have an agreement. What's going to happen if the wheels start to fall off here? Would you
Well,
agree?
I agree. Most realtors, I'll tell you right now, the reason why our our industry is, it's flawed, right? The system's broken for one thing, right?
Yeah.
The bar to get in is so low. Think about it. We're writing contracts, okay? We're not exactly like, we're not a lawyer, but guess what? The consequences of us screwing up and writing that contract is that of a real estate lawyer, if not worse.
Yeah.
Right? It's but look at the education that they would have, like a lawyer would have to get to become a lawyer,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's not like, hey, let's spend 30 days at this and then become this, right? No, there's actual, you actually have to go to school for quite a long time. Like we're talking about 8 years in total, right?
Yeah.
We're, have you seen like have you seen how our system is? It's bad. It's just we can get it so quick. And then on top of that too, if there has to be some requirement that you have to be able to prove that you do X amount of hours. This is such a big purchase, right? For anybody. Like
Yeah.
you're setting yourself up for retirement. If you purchase a home, and I mean, even if you pick the worst home, right? Technically, by the time you retire, you can actually, downsize and then live off these savings, right? Because if you're gonna rely just on your pension in the future, that pension might not exist in the future. This is
Yeah.
very this is very possible here. So you need to buy a home, get to as high as you can, and then basically downsize in retirement time, and you'll have money. Because the pensions I don't think are going to be there in the future.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to be substantial enough to be able to handle your payments every month. I think that's a
Yeah.
reality.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. And I think a lot of people, th- their home,
Right.
just think about that. Like by the time they go to sell their home when they're retiring, that's a good chunk of money that most people can use to invest or whatever to fund them during their retirement. So it's important. Like you got to make sure that what you're doing, you're making the right step. And
Right.
there's lots of things to watch out for. It's not as simple as just finding a person a house. Like we spend a lot of time, our buyer agents spend a lot of time with people figuring out what's your goals, like what do you need, and asking so many questions. And with sellers, the same thing. Like that's so important. Like we meet with sellers. It's not always about what's going on in your life right now, because maybe selling right now isn't opportune for you, but
Right.
you need to know all of your options so you can pick the best option for you at that point. But when you feel like you don't have options, that's a problem, right?
Well, see, that comes back to what you and I were talking about earlier about saving the client, right? Sometimes we have to save them from themselves, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they make a high pressure buy for no reason. There's a lot of factors that come into play when a person decides to purchase something, especially the first purchase that they ever make. Like I've seen people rush into something that they shouldn't have.
Yeah.
Absolutely, they shouldn't have. And you know what? The realtor is so happy to get that business, they just push it right through. I mean, right now, we are going through so many lawsuits right now. Like home buyers were like, I'm not going to mention people and stuff like that, right? But people were literally just 2 years ago, they were getting private loans and all of a sudden, guess what? For their 20%, so they could purchase $1 million home. I saw this sweet family do this, right? They basically had to get the 20% because the purchase of the home was over $1 million. Okay. So they they got this, and I spoke to him. I asked him, I go, why did you do this? He goes, well, the realtor told me that next year when it goes up, that I can just refinance this property and then pay back the 10%. I go, and then like we're talking, and they just closed. I go, have you considered that the property doesn't go up? Then what will you do? No, I didn't think of that. So realtors, and you know what? I'm guessing some of them. I'm only speculating it. They might have gotten paid in the back end for that mortgage deal, for that private deal that went through. It's quite possible, right? I'm not saying it did happen, but they also they also had these people buy this home. Guess what ended up happening 1 year later, Sandy? Take a wild
Oh
guess.
no, the market changed.
Market tanked completely.
Tanked.
So this
Oh my goodness.
$1.15 million home, like now, was worth 900. And the thing is, they kept on holding on. They're like, no, we see, they don't understand. Like people don't understand that the world doesn't owe you understanding. So they will only pay you what the market will give it, right? That's how market value is
Yeah.
determined. So they don't care that you had to pay these many mortgage payments or like to the private lending, all that stuff. So in the end, obviously I'm not going to share addresses or anything like that. In the end, this is what happened. The property ends up selling for about $850,000. Think
Oh
about
my
that.
goodness.
So the damage is not done, right? Like
Hmm.
this is just the tip of the iceberg of the financial issues and problems that these people will have. This is not the it's not over.
Yeah. The
Far
sad part
from it.
is the price has probably gone up again now, and they probably, yeah, it's a shame.
It's
It's a
yeah,
shame. Yeah.
it's a shame, right? So like the thing is, and like I said, everyone, I'll tell you now, our profession, like I said, low bar and all that stuff. That's why we're not well liked, right? And the thing is, it's a few of these bad apples that reflect on the rest of us, right? And like I said, most of them, you have to know the credentials of who you're working with, right? If they treat this job as a hobby, do you really want someone that treats their job as a hobby, basically helping you with
Especially
the
in
biggest
this. Yeah.
purchase of your life?
Yeah.
This is probably the biggest purchase of your life. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
that's it. I can't think of a bigger purchase.
Yeah. It's true. It's very true.
Yeah.
It is for most people the biggest purchase. So you have to do your due diligence and make sure that you're making the right decisions. So, um, yeah, it's crazy.
So
What do you
what's the other
think?
one? Sorry, go ahead.
Well, we were going to talk about the interest rates. I think interest rates, I don't think I've talked to a few people the last little while, and they're saying, well, I'm going to wait for interest rates to drop. But I
Right.
think I don't think, I mean, if you look at the video I did with our mortgage broker,
Yeah.
Monica, they're chances are they're going to come down, but we're not going back down to 2%. So people are waiting for 2% interest rates.
Don't
That
even
is
think
not
about
going to happen.
3%.
Yeah, three is
Don't even think
we're
about
probably, yeah,
3%.
probably closer to four, maybe four and a half, somewhere around there, which is a stable, good market. Like that's where they should be. But we have such a housing shortage here. We can't afford for rates to go back down to 2%. Like that would be like disastrous. Can you imagine?
If that happened, then like what you and I were joking about, properties going up by 10%, that would
Yeah.
literally happen every 2 weeks instead of
Oh
every
God, yeah.
month. That's what
It,
would happen at 2%. It'd
yeah.
be crazy. Even at 3%, it would be crazy, right?
Yeah.
We just simply cannot do that because the inflation rate cannot be that high. If the
No.
inflation rate is that high, it's all over. It's all over.
Yeah.
Then we're gonna have to keep on raising like like when people see the minimum wage get increased, everyone's celebrating. But people don't actually understand what does that mean, right? If the minimum wage goes up X, right? What do you think happens? You have to charge X.
Yeah.
Or
Yes. Yeah. 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 Prices go up. Yeah. Prices go
or
up. They
you know
have
what
to.
happens? What always happens? The first thing is let's say the rates like minimum wage goes up by 10%. Guess what happens? The workforce shrinks by
Yeah.
10%,
Yeah.
right? So which one do you want? Do you want your job or do you want higher wages? Which one is it?
Yeah.
It's a it's
Yeah.
a conundrum that we're facing all the time.
Yeah, it is. It is. It very much so. And that's basically, I mean, it has to cover, like people have to be able to make a living wage. You have to be able to make enough money to like, you shouldn't have to work. If you want to have one person, like two parents, and one wants to work part-time or one wants to stay home, people should have the ability to do that. I think, in my opinion, people should have the ability to do that. But sometimes you can't do that. Like when everything costs so much money, you have no choice
Right.
but to have two full-time incomes. So
Correct.
if yeah, everything builds on everything, right? So inflation, everything's going up, including wages,
Everything
but
goes up.
so is everything, the cost of everything.
Correct.
Like I was talking to some people on the weekend with kids in daycare, and the cost of daycare is just like, it's almost like not worth going to work for one of the parents to not work, because all they're doing in some cases is paying for daycare, which is crazy.
That's I mean that's just one of the problems. But like you were telling me something about how we calculate our inflation rate. It's very different
Yeah.
from the rest of the world. Is that correct? Like I
Yeah.
remember you had a breakdown of it.
Yeah.
I wasn't really too sure about that part, but like could you share some of those
Yeah,
ideas?
so part of the problem is that Canada is one of the only countries that uses mortgage payments or uses housing costs to calculate inflation. So
Okay.
what was happening is inflation was going up. The Bank of Canada was keeping interest rates high because inflation kept going up, but the cost of carrying mortgages was part of that problem of pushing up inflation. So it
Okay.
was kind of like a double-edged sword. So you're saying like we got to drive down inflation, so we raise the rates, yet raising those rates increased the cost of mortgages, which drove up inflation. So there's no other country that takes housing costs into consideration when it comes to inflation. So what's the answer to that? I don't know. Like I'm not an economist, I'm not an expert on that, but you can't like you're causing the problem, right? So we
Yep.
had this problem with rates going up, which was causing housing to go up, which was causing inflation. And then we also had the Bank of Canada saying, don't spend money. The federal government was spending money like it was, they were just printing money like crazy, which was also driving up inflation. So they were at odds with each other. So it's kind of, how do you do that? How do you manage that? Right? Like in the States, you can write off your mortgage interest as on your income. We can't do that. We can't write off in mortgage interest in Canada, but in the States they can do that. So the way they figure out the numbers is a little bit different. I don't know the answer to that. There must be a reason that they have that in there, but I don't know what it is. But they need to adjust it accordingly, because then inflation would be lower, right? And the unemployment rate just went up too, right? I think it went up over
Yep.
6%. So
Yeah. Yeah. This is one of the things where I don't think people are realizing. Like, I think in 2020, basically 2020 running all the way to 2022, the job market, I mean, companies were overpaying people like big time, right? But they were hiring them as contractors. Once those contracts were done, they are now back to the regular pay. Problem is,
yeah,
they've been purchased. People forgot, right? In 2020 to 2022, that was another bull run if you're in real estate, and people started overextending themselves again. So we have that whole problem. The power sales. I am actually surprised that there aren't more power sales right now. I am
yeah.
stunned.
I've seen a few, but I also think the banks are like, they don't want to be taking over people's houses. So I think they're trying to
100%, of
do
course not.
everything they can, right? Because they don't want to do that. So there's options. I covered that in one of the other videos 2 weeks ago with Monica from our mortgage company on what to do if your mortgage is coming up for renewal and you're nervous. So you can go back and watch that video. There's
Yeah.
a number of different things, but it's a scary kind of situation, because then some people will say, well, I'll just rent, but rents are crazy right now. Like the
Yep.
amount of rent that you got to pay is really crazy. And then because of like everything, like we saying, every one thing leads to another, right? So investors are selling off their investment properties because they don't want to rent. They don't want tenants because the landlord tenant board is so one-sided. So it becomes this whole like, it becomes this whole vicious circle, and it's kind of, it's kind of scary, but I don't know. We'll see how this plays out. But I think if people want to live in big cities, if you want to be in Toronto, you want to be in Vancouver, you're going to pay. Like it's not cheap to do
You know what's
that.
so funny about Vancouver and Toronto? Like, Vancouver is like a tiny little town for us, right?
Hmm.
Like, the reason why their prices are high are very different from us, right?
Yeah.
We're more because services, we have a ton of jobs. For them, it's basically, if you've ever been to BC and you actually look at the map, there's only so much that you can live in BC, right? So once again, it's a demand issue, right? And it's I mean, they're very close to certain parts of the other world. They connect with the other parts of the world. So guess what? People buy a lot of land, and they land bank, all that crazy stuff, right? So it's very, very different.
Yeah.
But let's move on to that other subject that you and I wanted to talk about. Was it the new rules about the lawsuits and all that? That's
Oh
a
yeah.
fun one, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a fun one. So we'll see what happens there. I think so. For people who don't know, in the States, there's been a lot of lawsuits against real estate companies saying that the buyer agent should not, the seller should not be forced to pay the buyer agent, which, if you think about it, is true. They shouldn't be, but the reason that happens, and the challenge is that if you have a buyer agent, how are they going to fund that? It's got to get funded through the mortgage financing. That's why it typically gets paid through the proceeds of sale. But I've had this conversation years ago when we didn't have the MLS and you couldn't find properties online, and people said, well, you have to pay the buyer agent a certain amount of money or they're not going to show it. That's not the reality anymore, because everybody's got access to things that are on the market. So if you have an agent who wants to see properties, or sorry, you have a buyer and they want to see properties, the agent can't control that inventory because they can see all that inventory. The worst thing I see in my mind is, and I'm not going to name company names here, but here's the worst thing I see in my mind is that we go out, we market, we get a listing, we take all the risk, we get all the marketing done, we put the house on the market, and then that gets syndicated. And then what happens? You see where a buyer will show up at a house, get out of their car, the buyer agent gets out of their car, they shake hands, they've never met. They've never met. And the
Yep.
buyer, and then they take them through the house and they put in an offer, and that buyer agent gets paid 2 or 2.5%. In my mind, that is absolutely like incredulous to me. If you're working with a buyer agent and you have sat down with them and you've gone over all their options, you're looking for off-market properties, you're looking for everything that's on the MLS, you're scouring your database to find properties, that agent deserves to get paid because they've done a lot of work. But an agent who shows up in front of the house, has never met that client, meets them for the first time, shows them the house, and then they put an offer and it gets paid the same amount, in my mind, is insane. That should not happen. And
So
that's where these problems have come in.
so Sandy, let's go into more detail about what a lot of the people don't know, because now we're showing you what's underneath the hood, right? So I will say a couple things, but obviously control me. Don't let me say crazy stuff that'll get me in trouble. But so for home sellers, if you don't know, right? Like the reason why the rules have changed so much, and is because it's not to the benefit to the home seller. Would you agree? Like some of these
Agreed,
these rules,
100%.
they're not
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Like exclusive, exclusive listings. Should we share with the people listening why they changed that rule? Do you
Go
think we
ahead.
could?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay, let's share. So, just so you know, the reason why we are not allowed to put like a listing as exclusive, because our board wants us to put it on their database, and that's what it is. And they sell that database.
Yeah.
Just so you guys know that. That's why we have to put it on the real estate board immediately. It's because we're part of that board. We're actually forced to do that. It's not that we want to, we are actually forced.
Yeah.
It's the rules. We will get fined,
Yeah.
right?
And it's not
And
always in the seller's best interest to do
it
that.
isn't. It isn't. Because not every seller wants to, they want their privacy. They don't want to be on that, right? They don't think about it. You're the seller, you're the one that, it's because of the sellers, right? And buyers that our business exists. But think about it, our boards are getting in the way to basically decide what a seller wants. That to me is crazy.
Yeah. That's because they want all, like, the fact of the matter is they want all realtors to be the same and to be on the same level playing field. Now, you can't tell me that somebody like you have 16 years experience, I have over 30 years of experience,
Right.
is the same as an agent who got their um license
License, yeah.
last month. Now,
Of course
there are
not.
some good new agents that are really good. I'm not going to say there isn't,
Of
but
course. Yeah,
there,
we can only we're only speaking in
yeah.
generalities, right?
And then, agents who do the minimum required to
Ugh.
get to keep your license every 2 years, that's one thing. But we spend thousands and thousands of dollars on training every year. Should we get paid more money? Absolutely, we should. That's a whole different ballgame. But my point is, I take all the risk, you take all the risk when you get a listing. You have to prospect, you have to educate the seller, you do the photos, you do the staging, you do all the marketing that's involved there. And then the real estate board says, no, you can't act as if that's your listing. You have to put it out there so it looks like it's everybody's listing. I don't understand that. That's not in the seller's best interest
And
because,
more importantly,
yeah,
because they have these contracts. It's called an IDX, right? They
yeah,
sell these things out. It's our board that makes money. It's not
yeah.
us.
And then, yeah, and then
Just
exactly,
let's
yes,
clarify
yes,
that. People don't
yes,
know, most
yes,
most your average person does not know this,
yeah,
right? So the seller, let's say for instance, some people, they sell for different reasons and they could be very embarrassed about this. They don't want this to be known, right?
yeah,
No, the board will not even allow it.
yeah. That's it, it's
It's gross.
crazy to me.
It's
Yeah, it's
disgusting.
crazy to me because then you have situations where, let's say, for instance, okay, I list a property in Mississauga, and
Correct.
it's syndicated. Somebody will find that online. Let's say they may reach out because they find it on somebody's somebody's,
Yep.
let's say, site that's in Scarborough. Now they call them, they think that's the listing agent, and they say, I want to get more information about this house. How motivated is that person to help them? Like, they're going to try to sell them a house, whereas I'm acting for the seller. I'm going to try to sell that house because
Right.
that's my client. But the
Yep.
buyer agent is not the seller's. The buyer agent is adversarial to the seller. The buyer agent is going to try to sell them a house, not necessarily that house. I think if
Yep.
sellers truly understood that, there'd be a lot of difference. I
Of
had this
course.
conversation with a seller who said, you have to pay out more money because buyer's agents won't show it. Well, what happens when a buyer agent or a buyer sees that property and calls their agent and says, I want to see this house, and that agent says, I'm not going to show it to you for whatever reason? That's a huge problem. You gotta show whatever the buyer wants to see.
So basically, our boards have done something illegal. Can we say that? Are we allowed to say that? Borderline, it's gray area. Who
We'll
cares?
find
I'll say
out.
it then. Okay, be quiet. I'll say it. Okay. So basically, they created a mess. They created a mess, and now we are paying the price. The seller is paying the price.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Everyone's paying the price except our boards.
Yeah.
Did you hear? Did you hear about what happened? All those companies that settled on it. So this class action lawsuit, right? After all this money that's been spent, guess what? The people that were part of the class action got for all this. Take a wild guess.
Probably $100, maybe
20
50.
bucks,
Yeah.
21, a cool
Yeah.
2163.
Yeah.
The lawyers kept all the money, guys. So
Yeah.
there you go. That
Yeah.
was did all that song and dance, so you get a eye-popping $21.63.
Yeah.
It was something
So
stupid.
we'll see what happens here, because that the lawsuits are starting to happen here. But the
Of course
fact
it
of the
is.
matter is, you're still gonna, you can still, like, I think there's a place for buyer's agents. I truly believe that there is a place for buyer's agents.
Of course there is.
It's
There
just
will
that,
always will be.
yes, you're gonna have to negotiate your fee through the buyer agent, and you can still get paid through the proceeds of sale, but it has to be the seller's option to do that, not forcing the seller to do that, because that
And
buyer agent
that's where
is
the
not
issue was.
working for them.
And that's where the issue was. It was
Yeah.
because most realtors, you have to remember, right? Let's say, Sandy, you and I, we want to go to any other company. We want to get a sales job. What would the process be? Right? We have to actually send in a resume. There would be an interviewing process, multiple interviews, and then finally okay, you know what? You're actually qualified to do this job. The reason why our boards were doing this, right? It was because these realtors were not qualified to do the job. So they're trying to make it as easy as possible. And you're saying, okay, well, that's a great board. The reason why they have to make it easy as possible is because they wanted membership money. That's it, right? And
Yeah.
let me tell you right now, you don't think it freaked them out? Did you know what happened with our memberships this year from January to December? Take a wild guess.
I'm sure it's dropped.
So I'll share with the GTA, right? So I'm going to give the numbers. These are reported numbers, right? So I'm not making this up. I'm not just doing this for fun. So for Treb membership, December, there was 75,496 realtors in the Treb memberships.
Yeah.
Okay. January, when it came to renewal time, 69,495. That's a serious drop off.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is.
If any company, let's say at our jobs, you work at any company and there was a 10% drop off in revenue, I'm telling you right now, there'd be some serious problems.
Yeah.
a lot of things are
Yes,
coming.
absolutely. And we'll see more of that, because the fact is, of 75,000 realtors, I think the numbers are half don't do any deals. So some may be part-time, some may be in a different field that they need their license, and some just hold their license for
That's
whatever
actually
reason.
correct. See,
Yeah.
Danny, I love that you brought this up, right? Because a lot of people don't know this. Some people, they need to have the license just for the job that they have. That's all. They don't actually actively trade.
Yeah.
Right? These are a lot of things that people aren't aware of. We just assume that people are aware of this, but a lot of people aren't aware of this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I think people would be shocked if they truly understood this industry.
Oh, of course.
It's crazy. I'm gonna be doing a lot of videos and stuff just on the actual, like, let's blow the lid off the real estate industry, and let's actually tell what's really going on, so people
Sure.
understand, because I think if you understand, you can make better decisions, right? And there's so much that goes into this.
Oh, I'm telling you right now, like, we've been you can't say lied. That's a very strong word, but we've been misled with a lot of information, right? And that's why that's why people think certain things. And to be honest, if you actually knew, like there's a stat that we have, right? When I'm meeting some of my sellers, right? Do you know what the median realtor, how many transactions the median realtor does? Like
The
right in the
median
middle?
realtor or the in the
Not the
middle?
average, not the average, just
Not the
smack
average.
dab right in the middle.
I don't know. 4?
One,
1.
one, one. Right? A lot of people, well, they will tell you. I don't know why it is. It was actually one of our colleagues in the coaching that we're involved. They put this awesome graphic. Remember Selling Sunset?
Yeah.
Yeah, they actually put this awesome graphic of what the people on Selling Sunset actually did. Did you know that most of them didn't make any money at all?
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I didn't.
no, a lot of people do not know this, right? So it's just it's just because we were just taught to believe all these things, so we're not really aware of all this stuff, right? So one of the numbers I want to share with you, if it's okay, like for sellers, right? A lot of sellers aren't aware of this. I mean, I can tell you right now, most realtors aren't even aware of this, right? And the numbers are basically, it works out to about, I think, almost 42%. 42% of realtors have not done a transaction. So out of the 69,000 as of January 31st, here, 69,495 realtors, only 28,000 of them did not do a transaction in the last
Wow.
12 months.
That's wow, it's almost half. It's almost 50%.
41.5%.
Yeah.
Okay? So, and then after that, guess so we have the math here, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the next 15,474
Yeah.
realtors did one. So your median realtor,
How many? 15,000?
15,474.
Did
This is
one
all on
deal.
Trev, did
Okay.
one
Yeah.
deal. So that,
Yeah.
like I said earlier, the median realtor does one transaction.
Yeah.
So what does that mean?
28,
Imagine
38.
if any one of us, right? So not just you and I as realtors, but just anyone who does their job. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Imagine if you did your job once a year. How how good could you really be at your job?
Yeah.
Right? Could you do paperwork? You're not well versed with the contracts. So there's just no way.
That's a good
You haven't
point.
seen a contract.
Yeah.
Haven't seen a contract. So chances are most just guys, so we're really blowing off the lid here on these people. So if you guys have more questions, call us, whatever, because these are questions that you probably want to know, or these are answers that you want to know. So
Yeah.
fire away, right? Ask us, right? Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is
That's
crazy, right?
yeah, that's for so over half of the realtors. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, and think
Yeah.
about that. So when as realtors, right? When do you think realtors actually look into the database to check for things when they're servicing a client? So if they do that once a year, what do they do for the
Yeah.
rest of the year? That would mean that they're not well versed. So they don't even know how to price a property. You know how I know that? Because every time when I get the most popular thing for realtors, so I'm going to share this, right? I'm not naming other realtors. That's just not right. But the training session, whenever I throw out a training session for ideas and I threw out the topics, guess what the number one topic would always be for me to do training on? It's always pricing,
Mhm.
because realtors can't do it. And the thing is this, the buyer today, even seller, because they have access. House Sigma, I'm happy of what they've done, but the thing is this: by giving all that information, they actually don't go into the details of the property. So people are
Yeah.
quite often
Yeah.
overestimating the price of their home, right? And then you have a realtor that's not really experienced to do it. That can only lead to disaster.
Yeah. We actually just were looking at this last week with House Sigma because
Yeah.
especially when you're in a market where houses are selling over asking, it can't pick up that data. So it goes
No,
by
it can't.
the list price. So it's misleading. But the other problem is if you live in an area where the houses are all like, they're all 4-bedroom, 2-story, 2.5 bathrooms, double car
House
garage,
Sigma
it can
doesn't
figure
factor
it
that.
out. But if you have a different house in that neighborhood, it's not going to be able to figure it out. So
Yeah, it won't. Yeah,
this is why you got to drill down. You got to work with a good realtor that can drill down on this stuff with you, because it's not always accurate. It can't be. It's just an algorithm, so it can't be accurate. You could
correct.
use it as a guide and stuff. They do
Yes,
have some
yes.
good stuff on there, but it's not. You can't take that information to the bank. Like, well, think about
100%.
it. If you, when the bank goes to do an appraisal, they're not using info from House Sigma. They're
Yeah,
doing
of
their
course not.
own they're doing their own research, which is what you need to do. There's a clue there, right? There, like, there's a clue.
Right. And the banks, I'll tell you right now, we can argue semantics and all that stuff, and people saying, oh, the people that bank, are they intelligent or not? Okay, we can argue that, but the people that are running it aren't morons.
Yeah.
Right? There's a reason why the ones that the decision makers at the top, they're not dummies. So the thing is, if they're still doing it a certain way, that's probably the hint.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely.
What
So,
was what was the other thing that you and I were talking about earlier that was interesting? Holy, we
so
really need to write
Tressa,
this
the
down.
lawsuit, I know, Tressa, the lawsuits, I know, but we got to wrap this up because we're
Yeah,
getting
yeah,
on to
no
one
problem.
o'clock. But
Not a problem.
here's what I'm going to do. We are going to, this will be on my YouTube channel.
Okay.
So subscribe to my YouTube channel. Chong is going to Nick Chong. Let me try that again.
Try it again. Go ahead. Go for it.
Nick is going to give his phone number. I'll give mine. Like, reach out. If you have questions, reach out. We're always happy to help. Like, know your options. That's
Yeah.
the biggest thing. Just know what your options are. When you know what all your options are, you can make the best decision for the information that you have right now.
Can I
So,
share a story before we go?
absolutely.
All right. So my parents, right, when their first home, so they're moving to their second home, right? And it was one of those things where they didn't really know who to hire. And they hired someone that probably they shouldn't have hired. And if my parents weren't so like they're pretty financially responsible, but at the time there was about a $30,000 difference, right? And that was when homes, so they were expecting 190,000. We only end up getting about 160, right? But if
Yeah.
they weren't financially responsible, the next home that they were moving into, they would have lost that deposit and all that stuff,
Oh my
right?
goodness.
And the thing is this, that's why what Sandy and I were talking about today about picking your realtors. Hopefully you pick one of us, all right? But make sure to do the work and review the realtors because you should be able to ask them, do you trade? One of the biggest questions you should be asking is this: do you have a job, another job?
Yeah.
That's a big one.
Yeah. That's a big one. That's a
Yeah.
whole other session.
We'll talk about it
How
another
do
time.
you pick a realtor, and should you
Let's do that sometime.
friend?
I would love to be part of that one.
Okay, let's do it. Okay, awesome. Kwong, how do people get in touch with you? What's your phone number? What's your email?
Well, you can always go to nicksellsthegta.com or you can go to 647 299 4062. That's my personal line. So if you really, really have any questions that need to be answered, you can give one of us the call. Like if you're over here in the East End, give me a call. If you're in the West End, that's Sandy's realm. Give her a call, right?
Absolutely.
Because honestly, chances are there's all the money in the world, and you have to make it count.
Exactly. Awesome. Thank you, Kwong. Thanks for joining
You're
me. I
welcome.
really
Thanks for having
appreciate
me.
it. I know you're always so straightforward, so never any BS. So
Yeah.
thank you.